A legacy game is where normally one group of people are going to get together and going to play the same game multiple times, and their actions in the game are going to affect the follow-on games. Different mechanics might come in, cards might be destroyed, components change as the story unfolds, or as different mechanics come into the game. To talk about a couple of legacy games we played recently, I've got Clarke and Prospect joining me. Thank you both for coming down.
Thank you for having us.
You're more than welcome.
Turn up for this.
Yeah, exactly. Very different from being in the control room. We played 2 legacy games recently: Ticket to Ride Legacy, Legends of the West, and The King's Dilemma. We talked a little bit, Alice, about Ticket to Ride Legacy as we were going through it. And
We sure did. What a time.
yeah, basically, you like Ticket to Ride a lot.
I love Ticket to Ride an unhealthy amount.
Yeah.
Like, Ticket to Ride is an excellent game. If you haven't played it, you should. And there's so many different varieties, and all of them are good almost.
Yep. And I enjoy the small, citier versions. I like a 15, 20-minute game of Ticket to Ride. Don't mind showing it to new players. Don't really want to spend the time playing the full game. That's just me. Prospect, you are somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played much Ticket to Ride prior to this, just sort of the Londons that you roped me in. But like, generally I like longer games, so I feel like if I pulled out Europe or whatever, I would enjoy that more than London, but I just don't know. So this was interesting going into Legacy.
Well, fun fact, I'm planning on playing every single variety of Ticket to Ride this year, and I'm going to force you to play with me, whether you like it or not.
Hooray, definitive answers.
Yeah.
It's also the reverse of loving Ticket to Ride is also how many legacy games I've played. I've played a lot, Prospect's played a few.
Yeah,
I think this is your first 2.
Yeah, I want to say 3. I feel like I played one somewhere during lockdown 1 or 2.
Okay.
But I don't remember anything that happened in lockdown 1 or 2.
I just said you played Endless Wingspan.
I did also play a game of Wingspan every single breakfast from lockdown 2 to the beginning of lockdown 5.
Build your own Legacy.
And sometimes over lunch. So yeah.
Yeah. So now going to Ticket to Ride Legacy. So it starts off. It's puzzle pieces of America. They expand. Different ones have different map pieces are going to have different mechanics. Some that are sort of more friendly than others. Some that last longer than others. We're not going to go too deep into spoilers here because we're going to just enjoy the game.
We will paddle gently into spoilers though.
Your overall experience, having played all 12 games.
I got something. I'll go first, that's fine.
Yeah.
As you sort of alluded to before, I haven't played a ton of Legacy games, but Ticket to Ride to me felt like quintessential Legacy, like what the format as it's described to me in a much more sort of purer form than a couple of the other ones I played, like Aeon's End and even King's Dilemma, where it's like, here's the base game, and every time you play, we're going to throw something else in, or take something else away, or add more rules, or do things that way. And it wasn't like, it was a little bit of the game sort of growing sometimes, and some other times just like, here's a bit of temporary spice to make these set of games interesting, or a different rule set to make that sort of thing interesting. I felt that, Legends of the West did that really well, and I enjoyed that a lot.
Because I think the first mission or 2 felt like one of those city versions of Ticket to Ride. You know, in 20 minutes, half an hour, there's not a huge amount of routes, there's sort of limited options, but you're sort of playing the standard Ticket to Ride game. And then it built on, as you were saying, different mechanics, some lasted longer. Which, when you mentioned Aeon's End is different because what they did is they said, this is the Aeon's End game, and the Legacy game will start like this and you'll build back up to it. So it's a good way to learn a system, but it means that the first couple of games, if you're an experienced gamer, are not that exciting.
Yeah.
This felt like you were adding in stuff that was pretty cool, generally. How did you find the additions?
So I found the additions fantastic. Look, there were scratchies. I love a scratchy. It gave me a lot of incentive to do the thing that meant that I could scratch the scratchy, and there were so many varieties.
And as we found for King's Dilemma, you also really love stickers.
I'd love a sticker. I must have. Okay, look.
Except the negative stickers.
I did not love the stickers in Ticket to Ride as much as I love the stickers in King's Dilemma. The stickers in King's Dilemma were a very driving motivation for me. The stickers in Ticket to Ride I made Prospect put on.
Yeah, but also, if I remember correctly, it was you and myself who were the only 2 players to run out of stickers in our colours. So
yes.
it's still installed.
We played strategically.
Yeah, that must be it,
Yeah. But I like that it added lots of little mechanics. And I've actually been finding, as I've been trying the different varieties of Ticket to Ride, that it has there's kind of a similar feel. It's like I recently played Ticket to Ride Germany, and that's got a mechanic where you have to pick up passengers. And while there was not passengers in Legends of the West, it was a similar kind of feeling. So you could see where in creating all the other versions of Ticket to Ride, they had little ideas and they borrowed things and like, oh, this could be cool, but what if we tried it this way? And then there's like, let's put it all in one really big box and then made it expensive and then made it so you could force people to play 12 games of it in a row. And I love playing 12 games of things in a row.
We did take a bit of a break in the middle, which made it hard to come back because we were
Yes.
2/3 of the way through. There's quite a lot of things. We were like, oh, what does this do? Is the ghost train still in it? Do we stop the? Oh no.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there is a lot to enjoy in the game. I think even if you're only sort of kind of like Ticket to Ride, you probably still have a good time.
I think you do need to be careful where you build your breaks in though, because we had to have a break because my wife and I went on holiday for 2 weeks and they're like, oh, when we get back, we'll play. And then we couldn't for some reason. And then we're like, we'll play at Christmas. And then Prospect got COVID and like, oh, we'll play in January. And then suddenly it was February and 2 months had passed and we did not. And it was at the worst point in the whole game because it was the most things at the same time.
Most amount of rules to remember.
Yeah.
That is the same thing with all legacy games. I think we had a huge gap with
Schedules and conflicts.
Yes. Well, board games in general.
But it was
that's
more
tricky thing.
fine with King's Dilemma because there's not a lot of things you need to remember. Things come up and you react to them. Whereas I think if we'd taken our break in Ticket to Ride on like say game 3 or 4, we would not have noticed. But because we took that break at like 7 or 8, it was a lot.
That's a good point. Like King's Dilemma, the mechanics don't really change, but like the narrative does, and like the impetus of your actions changes more. And you're sort of like building.
Speaking of narrative, because the way that Ticket to Ride works is you're choosing which you unlock, so the narrative is fairly loose, and there's a bit of a driving force in the narrative, but it's not much.
I think had we paid attention to the narrative, it might have been more present, but I did not care about what Mama O'Connell had going on. I'm sure if I was the kind of person that did get it involved in the wild, wild west kinds of stories, I would have gotten really deep into it, but I just wanted to put down trains.
Yeah, so I didn't care about that. We talked about Aeon's End Legacy before. I didn't care about the lore at all for that. Pandemic Legacy, when I played that has maybe it has 2 cards worth of story, and there was enough there you kept gripped about what was
Plus,
happening.
we've already lived through that. We get the gist.
That's true. Changing gears or changing tracks, going into King's Dilemma, which was kind of like there's not a huge amount of game there. It's more of a sort of choose your own adventure within a group, and you kind of got tracks you're going up and down that you might impact your dilemma, might impact your decision for some certain here's what's happening. Do you do this thing or do you not do this thing? And there's got to be some impacts.
Well, it's funny because King's Dilemma is like mechanically opposite to Ticket to Ride. It's mechanically very simple, and as I mentioned before, it just sort of stays the same. So it's just sort of like how it interacts with that narrative, and it's like you can. Like, we're not a particularly RP kind of narrative focused kind of gaming group. No,
we've tried. We're not good at it. It's not our jam.
Yeah, but King's Dilemma has a way of sort of weaving it in anyway, because you can be like, ooh, I really want that particular token to go up. So, all right, I'll read the card. In order to move that token up, we have to institute slavery. It's like, ooh, how much do I not care about
Which I was the only person who fought against slavery and also fought against bleeding out the slaves to create gold. I want it to be known I was against both of these things, and I was outvoted 4-1.
Oh, I had an achievement for bleeding out people to make gold. So
okay. Well, then that's fair. If it's like I think King's Dilemma is the game that you play if you like the idea of RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, but you don't want to roll dice and you don't want to have somebody have to come up with this big story and follow it. It's like
it certainly feels like a bit of an experience to have played it. I feel like we've experienced more than we've played it.
Yeah.
Where we've played Ticket to Ride Legacy.
Yes. There was one thing that happened towards the end of King's Dilemma, which was. I don't think it's a spoiler.
The mini game?
The mini game. Yeah, okay, cool. It is a spoiler, which it was. But that mini game was excellent, and I wish they'd had one of those.
Or a couple more.
In every second game, maybe, because that felt more involved.
I think it's also worth skirting around the spoiler that the conclusion was also really well done. I like the way they did that as well, even though our particular circumstances made it kind of one-sided.
Yeah, I think the conclusion needed to be set up slightly differently, so it's not as easy to make it as one-sided as we did.
Maybe
Though
a four-side even. Yeah.
that did work in my favor
Yes.
quite well, because I did win. I should also point out, I won both these games. Liam came second. It was quite close in both of them, actually. It must have been really upsetting. I'm sorry.
No, I don't mind. But yeah, that was sort of two different experiences in where you had a lot about the narrative with King's Dilemma, and then really about the gameplay and the mechanics and the changes that you had game to game in Ticket to Ride. You started playing the other Ticket to Ride games. Have you gone back and played the Ticket to Ride Legacy yet?
I would like to, but there's just so much setup, and I'm lazy. And so, like, setting up Ticket to Ride Germany, it does take a little bit, but like you just unfold the map and it's unfolded. Playing Ticket to Ride Legacy, when you just playing the other thing, is like, oh, good, I have to put together this puzzle and then I have to find.
It's also a lot of tickets because it's very big, but you had that option if you want to learn a game that you can go back to it. I think you could go back to it. I think a lot of other Legacy games you can't. How much you would want to after 12 games, I'm not sure.
I very much do want to. I just need to have the time and not have my apartment be in total shambles of 100 IKEA boxes.
Yeah.
I can't access enough table to play it again.
That is a dilemma.
I see what you did there. Well done.
No, I don't.
I think the other thing was that we had two quite different groups for the two games, which, granted, 4 of us were the same people. But having
Where are you going with this?
having Donald in the mix meant that the narrative of the narrative game was more narrative-y, which makes so much more sense in my head than when I say it out loud.
No,
but
I
it
get
does
Yeah.
really make a difference who you have playing the games and the kind of experience you will have. I think had we had more narrative-focused people in our Ticket to Ride game, we possibly would have become more invested in whatever it was Mama O'Connell had going on.
I don't think there was enough there.
No, it
I
wasn't
think-
good, but we could have made up our own little bits around it to
Sure,
make
if
it
that's
the
what we
story
wanted,
more of
yeah.
a thing. Yeah, if that's what you wanted, I think you could do that, but you don't have to.
Okay, so would you recommend Ticket to Ride Legacy for people, and would you recommend King's Dilemma to people?
Yes.
So,
Right, you go first.
I think you have to have played at least 2 or 3 games of the base USA version of Ticket to Ride and enjoyed them enough before you invest in Legacy. Because I loved all of it. However, my slightly less patient and quite pregnant wife did not necessarily have as much of a good time towards the end when there were so many extra things that you had to keep track of. So that is something to keep in mind. Whereas King's Dilemma, if you have the right group, I had a wonderful. I have no idea what the story was. I did not care. I just enjoyed being
Something
there.
about Slayers and Gold, got it, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the way the story worked is you sort of got hints of the storylines throughout. It wasn't just here's the narrative. You were kind of mixing in narrative choices
Yeah.
and cards.
And
so-
if you paid attention, you would know what happened.
sure,
There was definitely a king, and he had a lot of dilemmas.
There was
There
lots
was
of
several
kings.
kings.
There were several kings.
Yeah, yes, these are both games that I enjoyed and would play again. But yeah, it is about finding the right people, because you're saying our Ticket to Ride, perhaps you need that sort of base understanding to get the most out of it. And I've also heard that many like hardcore and top level board game reviewers and stuff sort of bounced off it as kind of medium. So I kind of agree, but kind of don't. It does sit in that like intermediate zone.
Yeah.
Where it's, I found it had enough mechanical depth to be really interesting, and it wasn't basic by any means, and I enjoyed it a lot like that.
It's
but
the
yeah.
kind of legacy game,
Yeah.
like just jumping off what you were saying, it's
Yeah.
kind of legacy game that if you had like a regular dinner party with friends or cousins or parents, this is the kind of legacy game you would take to that, perhaps less than at like a hardcore board gamey
Yeah.
weekend where you have like the 5-hour strategy.
Yeah.
This is not for you.
Yeah.
This is just fun.
King's Dilemma, also enjoyable. The group I wouldn't recommend it to is sort of people you just met. It's not an icebreaker game.
No.
This is for people you have a good rapport with, long-time friends, the more you're able to comfortably bicker with each other, the more you'll get out of King's Dilemma.
Yeah, and if you feel comfortable emotionally blackmailing each other,
Yeah.
and like knowing that it will be totally fine if you do that, it will go much better for you.
Yeah.
I think the main thing with legacy games is you have a group that can meet regularly. That's
Yes.
the core thing that
Yes.
you need for
It's
any
just
of
the
them.
necessity of the
I
situation.
don't necessarily think that what you were saying about Ticket to Ride Legacy having like very involved or very interesting, I didn't think it was quite as much, but I still had a positive experience with it.
Because he's the bigger board game nerd, and he wants the bigger board gamey nerd games.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, true, actually.